y'all, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Stephanie, and I appreciate y'all stopping by. Today, I'll be showing y'all how I made these 6 Kirklands inspired decor dupes. I absolutely love shopping at Kirklands, but don't necessarily love the prices. So I picked out a few of my favorite pieces and decided to try my hand at recreating them for a lot less. I hope y'all enjoy the video, and if you do, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Let's go ahead and jump into DIY number 1. For this project, I used one set of these burner covers from Dollar Tree, a 6-inch terracotta pot from Walmart, and one of these 3.5-inch terracotta pots that comes in a 2-pack from Dollar Tree. To make the small pedestal tray, I used a small burner cover and the 3.5-inch terracotta pot. I flipped the pot over and applied E6000 around the outside edge of the bottom and placed it down in the center of the underside of the small burner cover. I set something heavy on top of the burner cover and set it aside to allow the glue to dry for a few hours. I then repeated this step to attach the 6-inch terracotta pot to the underside of the large burner cover to make the large pedestal tray. Again, I set something heavy on top and allowed the glue to dry for a few hours. After the glue had a little bit of time to set up, I took both pedestal trays outside and gave them a coat of Rust-Oleum chalked linen white spray paint. Due to the winter weather, the spray paint would not dry, so I used Krylon chalky finish paint in the color Classic White and gave both trays 3 good coats, allowing them to fully dry between coats. Next, I used Waverly chalk paint in the color Ink and a small sponge pouncing brush and carefully went around the bottom edge of the burner cover to give it an enamel wear look. I find using a sponge pouncing brush to paint edges of projects like this gives a much cleaner look and it's super quick. After I had the bottom edge of the burner cover painted, I took the same pouncing brush and painted the bottom edge of the terracotta pot. Here is how the small tray looked once I had the edges painted. Then, using the same pouncing brush and a photo of the original Kirkland's piece as a reference, I distressed a few areas around the base and on the top of the tray. I used the dry brush method to create the distressing by using just the paint that was left over on the sponge instead of dipping it into more paint. I then repeated these steps on the large pedestal tray, and this one is finished. I am super happy with the way these pedestal trays turned out. I will say though that the black edges around the bottom are a lot thicker than the ones on the original piece, but I tried just doing the bottom half and it just didn't look right. If you could find 2 different size metal buckets, you could use those instead and have the thin black edge on the bottom of the trays. Here is a quick look at the original pedestal trays from Kirkland's versus my version. I only made 2 of the 3, but it only cost me $3.86 to make both trays. Moving right along to DIY number 2. For this next project, I used one of these wooden cutting boards from Walmart and 2 packs of the votive candles from Dollar General. I started by placing the votives on top of the cutting board and spacing them out evenly in a straight line. Once I had them placed where I wanted them, I took a pencil and traced around the bottom of the votives so that I would know where to drill the holes. I used a 1 3/4 inch hole saw bit with my drill and cut out the 4 holes for the votives. After I had all the holes drilled, I took my sanding block and sanded down around the edges. I used Minwax wood stain in the color Golden Pecan and stained the entire cutting board front and back. Next, I used 28 of the medium-sized pieces from this glitter vase filler from Dollar Tree. I used a pair of scissors to cut each of the pieces in half so that I would have a total of 56 pieces. Once I had all the pieces cut, I took my finger and flattened them out just a bit. I used Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster and painted the tops and sides of each of the foam pieces. To make these easier to paint, I placed thumbtacks through a piece of cardboard and placed the foam pieces on the tips of the tacks to hold them in place. After I had all the pieces painted and they were completely dry, I used hot glue to attach them around each of the holes. I made sure the foam pieces were as close to the edge of the opening as possible without actually going over the edge so that the votives would still fit into the holes. Here is how the cutting board looked once I had all the foam pieces in place. To finish up this quick little project, I placed the votives back into the holes, and that's it for this one. I think this candle holder turned out fantastic. It's not as long as the original, but I'm happy with it, and it fits perfectly on the shelf in my entertainment center. Here is a look at the original from Kirklands versus my version. It cost a total of $10.25 to make mine, but if you can find the votive holders at Dollar Tree, you can make it even cheaper. On to DIY number 3. For this project, I used 4 square deck baluster pieces from Lowe's that were 2 by 2 by 36 inches. For the legs of the ladder, I cut one end off of 2 pieces so that they were flat, but left the angle on the other 2 ends. Then for the rungs of the ladder, I cut a piece at 9 inches, one at 10 inches, and then the last one at 11 inches. I arranged the pieces where they needed to be and made sure the rungs were evenly spaced. Once I was happy with the spacing, I applied a generous amount of wood glue to one side of the ladder and set the rung in place. Then, with the help of my husband, I put a screw through the side of the ladder and rung to secure it into place while the wood glue set up. I also made sure to go back with a damp paper towel to remove any of the excess wood glue that squished out. I then repeated these steps to attach the other 2 rungs to the side of the ladder and then attach all 3 rungs to the other side. For the frames, I used a 6 by 6 burlap canvas and an 8 by 8 burlap canvas, both I got on sale at Hobby Lobby. I removed the burlap from both of the frames along with the staples on the back. Once I had the burlap removed, I took a pencil and marked the 2 places on the top front side of both canvas frames where I needed to drill holes. I then used a 3/8 inch drill bit to drill the holes in both canvas frames. Next, I used Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster to paint the frames front, back, and sides. Once the paint was dry, I took Waverly chalk paint in the color hazelnut and a sponge pouncing brush and distressed around the front and sides of the frames. Then, to tone down the color of the hazelnut paint, I used the same pouncing brush without cleaning it and some plaster chalk paint and went over the distressed areas to make it look more worn and faded. To blend the colors together and to distress the frames a little bit more, I took a sanding sponge and lightly sanded over the front and sides of both frames. Here is how the frames turned out once they were sanded. I also used the 3/8 inch drill bit to drill 2 holes in the top and middle rungs of the ladder that lined up with the holes on the frames. I used Minwax stain in the color Golden Pecan to stain the ladder. I used this thicker jute from Hobby Lobby to put the ladder and frames together. I cut 2 pieces of the jute that were the same length and wrapped one end of each piece with Scotch tape to make it easier to thread through the holes. I fed one piece of the twine through the back of one of the holes on the top rung of the ladder and then back through the matching hole on the front of the small frame. I then carefully flipped the ladder over and adjusted the length of the twine so that the frame would hang a little lower than the rung, and then used a stapler to staple the pieces of twine into place. I then repeated this step to add the other piece of twine to the other hole, making sure the frame would hang straight when the ladder stood up. When I had both pieces of twine stapled into place, I took some scissors and cut off all the excess twine. Then, to finish off this project, I repeated the steps to attach the 8 by 8 frame to the middle rung of the ladder. I cut out 2 pictures from a chicken calendar that I had on hand and taped them to the back of the frames just for the reveal and until I can get some family pictures printed. I couldn't be happier with the way this mini ladder frame turned out. I've had my eye on it for a while, but knew I could make it for a lot less. Here's a look at the original piece from Kirkland's versus my version. It cost me $8.71 to make my mini ladder frame, and it's a bit bigger in scale than the $24.99 original. Let's move on to DIY number 4. For this project, I used one of these signs that I picked up at a thrift store for $2.99, but it was originally from the Target dollar spot. I started by removing the twine hanger, then used Waverly chalk paint in the color ink and painted the front and sides of the sign with 2 good coats. Next, I used 15 of these giant craft sticks from Walmart. I cut off one end of the craft stick with some scissors and placed it down on the sign inside the frame at a slight angle to resemble a fin on a shutter, and used a pencil to mark where I needed to cut it. I used a pair of scissors to cut the craft stick to size and double-checked to make sure that it was a snug fit inside the frame. I then used this piece of craft stick as a template to cut the other 14 sticks to size. Once I had all 15 craft sticks cut, I used Waverly chalk paint in the color ink to paint the front, back, and sides of all the craft sticks. Once the paint was dry, I started to attach the craft sticks inside the frame. I placed a line of hot glue along the back edge of the craft stick and placed it down inside the frame at a slight angle so that the edge of the craft stick was even with the outside edge of the frame. I held the craft stick in place until the glue had time to set up. I repeated this step to add in the second fin, except this time I made sure the back edge of the craft stick was just a little underneath the front of the first craft stick. I then continued to repeat these steps to add the other 13 craft stick pieces to finish the fins on the shutter. This is how the shutter turned out once I had all the fins glued into place. Next, I used the letters H, M, and E that are 4.5 inches tall that I picked up at Hobby Lobby. I used Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster and gave all 3 letters 2 good coats. Once the paint was dry, I placed the 3 letters on the shutter, leaving a space between the H and M for the wreath. After I was happy with the placement of the letters, I used hot glue to attach them to the shutter. To make the O in home, I cut out the letter O from some scrap cardboard big enough to fit between the letters H and M. I used boxwood from Walmart to create the wreath. I pulled all the greenery pieces off of the stems and used hot glue to attach them going around the front of the O all in the same direction. I started by attaching a single layer all the way around and then went back in and filled in the gaps so that I was left with a nice full boxwood wreath. I did end up using the entire pick for this piece. Here is how the wreath turned out. Then to finish up this project, I hot glued the wreath to the shutter. I think this sign turned out really cute. Even though it's smaller than the inspiration piece, it's the perfect size for my entryway table. Here is a look at the original piece from Kirklands versus my version. Like I said, mine is smaller than the original, but it fits my decor space better, and it only costs $10.84 to make. Moving on to DIY number 5. For this project, I used 4 of the 5x7 canvases from Dollar Tree. I started by removing the canvases and the staples from all 4 frames and used a sanding sponge to smooth them out and remove the splinters. Next, I used 28 of the giant craft sticks from Walmart. I cut one end off of one of the sticks and placed it on the back of one of the frames and used a pencil to mark where I needed to cut it. I then used this craft stick as a template to cut 20 more sticks the same size. I cut 2 of those craft sticks in half so that I would have a total of 4 skinnier pieces. Once I had all of the craft sticks cut, I put hot glue along the top and bottom edge and attached 5.5 craft sticks to the back of each of the frames. I then continued to repeat this step to add the remaining craft sticks to the backs of the other 3 frames. I used 2 of these 1/4 inch by 12 inch poplar squares that I picked up at Lowe's to create the cross pieces for each of the frames. I placed one of the squares inside the frame diagonally, corner to corner, and marked it with a pencil where I needed to cut it so that it would fit nice and snug. Once I had it marked, I took a pair of miter shears and cut the square to size and double-checked to make sure it fit. I then repeated this step to cut the other square, but this time placed it across the first square in the shape of an X. After I had both pieces cut to size, I laid them back down inside the frame in the shape of an X and took a pencil and marked the top piece on either side of the bottom piece so that I could cut it in half and remove the excess piece so that it would fit down flush inside the frame. Once I had the piece marked, I used miter shears to cut it to size, cutting at a slight angle based on the marks that I had made for a snug fit. Next, I used some hot glue to glue the square pieces into place. I started by attaching the longest piece first and then added the smaller cross pieces. A little tip, when you cut the cross pieces, place them back down inside the frame on the side that they were cut for. That way they don't get mixed up or turned around. It makes things go a lot quicker and smoother. Here is how the panel looked once it was complete. I then repeated these steps to add the cross pieces to the other 3 frames. After I had all 4 panels complete, I used hot glue to attach them together to form a box. I found it easiest to attach 2 of the sides to the front piece and then attach the back piece last, paying close attention to how the front panel sets on the side panels. That way you end up with a nice square and not a wonky piece you have to take apart and put back together. I used 6 more of the giant craft sticks to create the bottom of the planter. I again cut the end off of one of the craft sticks and placed it on the bottom of the box to mark where I needed to cut it so that it would fit. I then used this craft stick as a template to cut the other 5 craft sticks. After I had all 6 pieces cut, I used hot glue along the top and bottom ends of the craft stick to attach them to the bottom of the planter. Here is how the small planter box turned out once it was finished. I also made a large planter using 8x10 canvases from Dollar Tree and 41 of the giant craft sticks by following the exact same steps as I did for the small planter. I used Krylon Chalky Finished Antiquing Wax in the color Dark Vintage and gave both planters a good coat, wiping off the excess, and this project is complete. I am thrilled with the way these 2 planter boxes turned out. They were super easy to make and fit in perfectly with the rustic feel of our home. Now, since I used craft sticks and hot glue on the bottoms, I'm not going to be putting anything real heavy into the planters, but I will be placing my 2 faux magnolia trees in them along with some moss. Here is a look at the Kirklands original versus my version. Again, the original came with 3 boxes and I only made 2, but the cost to make mine was $20.80. And last but not least, DIY number 6. For this project, I used 3 of these 5x7 canvases that came in a 2-pack from Michael's, but you could also use the 5x7 canvases from Dollar Tree. I started by removing the canvases from all 3 frames and all the extra staples on the back. I did leave 2 staples in each of the corners. I also removed the staples from the 4 corners on the front of the frames, but went back and added a staple closer to the opening to secure the frames since it'll be hidden by pictures. Next, I used some stainable wood filler to fill the holes on the front side of the frames and set them aside to fully dry. Once the wood filler was completely dry, I took a sanding sponge and smoothed out all the areas where I had applied the filler. Then I took Minwax stain in the color Golden Pecan and stained all 3 frames front and back. After the stain was dry, I took Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster and a stencil brush from Dollar Tree and dry brushed all over the front and sides of the frames. Here's how all 3 frames turned out. I did go back with a sanding sponge and sand off some of the paint if I happened to get it heavy in any one area. For the sides of the frame, I used 2 of these 1/2-inch oak dowels that are 36 inches long that I picked up at Lowe's. I used Waverly chalk paint in the color ink and painted both dowels with 2 coats. Next, I used 4 of these 5-gallon paint sticks that come in a 3-pack that I pick up at Lowe's. I cut all the paint sticks to 9 inches long and used Minwax stain in Golden Pecan to stain the fronts and backs of all 4 sticks. Once the stain was dry, I took Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster and a Dollar Tree stencil brush and dry brushed the front of the paint sticks. I did apply more paint to the ends of the sticks to resemble the original piece from Kirklands. However, I did go back later and sand them down to blend them in with the wood a little bit better. Here is how the paint sticks looked once they were painted and dry. To assemble the base of the frame, I placed the paint sticks between the 2 dowel rods at roughly 10 inches apart and used hot glue to attach the ends of the sticks to the dowels. I made sure the paint sticks were flush with the front of the dowels, similar to the inspiration piece. I would recommend using a stronger adhesive, but for time purposes, I just used hot glue. I did go back once the glue had fully set up and flipped the piece over and added a generous amount of hot glue along the seams on the back side of the piece and went in with more ink chalk paint to clean it up a little. I used 3 of the large skewer sticks from Dollar Tree to create the X shape behind the frames. I flipped the piece over so that I was working on the back side, and just like I did with the cross pieces for the planter boxes, measured out how long the skewer needed to be to reach corner to corner and cut it to size. I then laid the other half of the skewer stick across the first piece and measured it out and cut it to fit. To keep the back from being bulky and not set flush against the wall, I went ahead and cut the cross pieces just like I did with the planter boxes so that they would set flush against the long cross piece. I repeated these steps to cut the other 2 skewer sticks to make the cross pieces for the other 2 sections of the frame. I used Waverly chalk paint in the color ink to paint all 9 pieces of the skewer sticks. Once the pieces were completely dry, I used hot glue to attach them to the paint sticks on the back side of the frame. I started by attaching the longest piece with a good amount of hot glue on each end. I then attached the 2 cross pieces using hot glue. I did use a generous amount of hot glue to attach the 2 smaller pieces to the center of the long piece. It may be a bit messy, but I did go back and paint all the glue that was showing with the ink chalk paint, and once the picture frames are in place with the pictures, you'll never see the middle of the X. I then repeated this step to add the other cross pieces to the other 2 sections. I placed one of the canvas frames in the center of one of the cross sections and used a pencil to mark where I needed to apply hot glue to attach the frame to the base. I then added the hot glue between the marks I made and placed the frame onto the base. Again, you could use a stronger adhesive, but I used hot glue and it's held up well for me. I then repeated this step to add the last 2 frames. I did go back again and reinforce the seams on the back side of the frames with more hot glue for a little added security. I went ahead and cut out 3 more of the chicken pictures from the calendar and taped them to the front of the frames so I could show y'all how the pictures are supposed to go in the frames. And until I can get some family pictures printed, then I'll replace them. I love how this frame turned out. I'm planning on adding a sawtooth hanger to the back so that I can hang it on the wall. I just did not have any on hand. Here is a look at the original from Kirklands versus my version. Mine is a little bit taller than the one from Kirklands, and it cost me $10.84 to make. Here is one final look at all of today's Kirklands inspired decor dupes. Let me know in the comments, do you think I nailed it or failed it? I absolutely love how all these projects turned out, and best of all, they were fairly cheap and easy to make. Which one of these projects is your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. I had a hard time picking my favorite, but I'm going to have to go with the wood crate planter boxes. I want to thank each and every one of y'all for stopping by, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really does help me out here on YouTube, and if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, what are you waiting for? Click that button and stick around for a little while. I have tons of fun projects on the way. I'll see y'all next time.